Aisha and Debbie dish about the issues that affect our lives and families.
It's Aisha and Debbie Dish with Aisha Sultan and Debbie Monterey. And Aisha, your recent column in the Sunday Post-Dispatch about estate sales really got me thinking about junk.
And how do you discover if there's actually treasure amongst all the trash in your house?
Yes, because we all have way too much stuff. So we have lots of places to go with that. And you may be having so much stuff to think about that it's keeping you up at night.
So how do you make sure that you're getting enough sleep and good quality sleep? We have someone in the studio today who's going to talk to us about that.
In fact, he is the chairman of the National Sleep Foundation. You know I'm obsessed with sleep, so I
am too.
Many questions.
Yes.
We talk about the American dream, but what does that even mean anymore? A new poll shows that many of us believe the American dream is slipping away.
Let's talk a little bit later about what that actually means and who it impacts.
Well, let's start with your story about estate sales. You had a really interesting article about a guy who, because if your parents pass away or suddenly you find out that there's this whole household you have to clean out, it's extremely overwhelming. And how do you know if it's valuable or whether you should just get a giant dumpster? And you talked to one man who's kind of an expert in that.
Yeah. So I talked to somebody. They have these like local estate sale professionals who go around, will come to your house. I mean, it's hard to find a reputable one, or you have to, let's say like any service business, you have to do your homework and make sure you're going with someone reputable. But they come to your house and they tell you whether you have enough stuff in there that it would be worth your time and money to go through the trouble of an estate sale. And then they take a percentage of the commission as their cut. So this is what was interesting to me when I did that story. There are three ways in which people decide to get rid of everything inside their house. One is if they're downsizing. Two, like if your parents are moving into a retirement community or a smaller house. Two is if someone actually dies, passes away, and you're left responsible for it. And then three, it's just families who are moving and making a move in which it doesn't make sense to take all their furniture and all their stuff. So they actually try to sell as much of it as possible. Now, a lot of people try to do a lot of this online. Like there are sites like Everything But the House, ebth.com, where you can try to sell everything. I mean, obviously eBay and all these other things. But some people are not that familiar and it seems like a lot of work. So you think, oh, I'll just get someone in here. So how can you tell if your stuff is actually worth anything? Have you been in your basement or in your attic and looked around and seen what actually is still in there? Do you even know?
Well, we've been working on cleaning out our basement, so I'm pretty aware, but I think it's mostly junk.
Yeah, so that's the thing. That was the first most interesting thing to me, is that a lot of times you have all this stuff and you don't even remember it, or you don't even know like what is there and do you want to keep it, do you want to give it away? So I walked through a house of a man and woman who were downsizing to a condo in the city, and the professional who was with me, Alan Cleary, he looked at all their stuff and he was just like, things that they thought might be valuable were not really in demand anymore, like Victorian furniture or old style furniture, but things that they might not have thought were worth anything, like vintage electronics, like old stereo systems.
That was surprising because I have an old stereo that is collecting about 4 inches of dust in our basement.
Okay, so you are sitting on money there because apparently they're super hot right now and there's like a big demand for it. And and the homeowner was also surprised. He was like, that whole thing? And they were like, yeah, it's selling. These things are selling like reel-to-reels in their original containers or money in the bank. He said, I mean, things that you wouldn't expect because, trends change and what's in demand and what's collectible changes. So I know after I researched the story, I was like, okay, the first thing to do is actually make an inventory. Even if you can't clean it all out, just try to make a list of what you actually have. And then you can get a sense of whether or not some of it might be worth keeping or getting rid of.
Well, this is why that would be difficult because we have a hoarding problem in this country.
Yeah.
And I'm probably not telling you anything you don't know, but more and more people seem to be affected by it. And from everything I've heard from professionals, it is a psychological thing. And it's one of the hardest things to break people of is hoarding. So we are collectors of things and we get attached to these things and then we don't want to throw them out. And to us, they're valuable.
Right.
So, I had a situation where I had a loved one who was trying to do the right thing and help his parents clean out their basement. Their basement was filled with junk.
Yeah.
I mean, old stoves that hadn't worked in 30 years, just boxes of junk. And so he got a big container and started throwing stuff out. And they freaked out. They were pulling moth-eaten things back out that they thought were valuable. And it's really difficult. And so then it puts the kids of those people in a bad position because you have to be the bad guy, and it's hard to cure. So it made me also think of interviewing the head of U-Haul here in the St. Louis area, because you may notice that there is a self-storage place popping up on every corner.
Because people
seems.
run out of room in their houses to put all their junk.
And so the story that I was going after was that U-Haul is doing something that I think is cool, and they're using a lot of historic buildings that had been unused in the city, and they're turning them into storage facilities, like the old Globe Drug across from the old police station on Clark and Tucker, and then the old National Candy Factory that's in South City that you can kind of see from every point.
Right.
And it was just going to, it was just sitting there empty, and they're turning it into a big storage facility. So I thought that was cool that they were preserving history. And I said, but in all honesty, do we need this much storage space? And he said, it is one of the fastest growing sectors out there right now, because people just cannot find enough room for all their stuff.
And I've talked to organizers, and I've interviewed and done stories with organizers about, you're right, the emotional attachments. And I form emotional attachments to stuff because I know the stories behind things I've gotten and who's given them to me and the feeling that goes with it. And so, you know what? I really thought about this a lot because my family is in Houston, and 50,000 homes there have been damaged or, uninhabitable because of Hurricane Harvey. And I thought about how when disasters like that strike so many people, it really makes you think about what's very important to you.
Absolutely. What could you absolutely not live with? For me, it would be my photo albums.
Right.
But now for the last couple of years, I've been doing them digitally. So I know that if I were to somehow lose all my photo albums, at least some of them would still be preserved.
Right. And so that's the thing. Now a lot of us do have stuff. So maybe when you think about prioritizing like all the stuff we have in our house, maybe converting some of the old stuff to like at least making a digital record of those baby pictures, wedding pictures, things that existed before, we had Facebook and, all these ways to store things digitally. That should be a priority. And then tackle all the boxes, like unmarked boxes of old Christmas decorations in the basement and, things like that. Because, really, we have hurricanes and natural disasters happening with such frequency right now. You kind of have to keep your relationship with stuff in perspective.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of keeping things in perspective, we talked about Harvey. We've got Irma coming, which is so far apparently one of the most, if not the most powerful storm to be ripping through the Caribbean, soon to hit Florida. So while we're still trying to help the people in Houston, we're now going to be hopefully we'll be having to help people in Florida for sure, but wherever else it hits. And then who knows what's behind it? Is it... I'm trying to think of the K. Is it Karina?
No, Katia.
Katia.
Yeah. It's a tropical storm, but I think that's headed more towards Mexico. Last I checked, these things can change on a dime.
Who knows? So there's a lot of need out there, and a lot of help that is definitely needed. So I'm feeling blessed because while we're talking about this horrible weather, we have amazing weather in St. Louis. The weather's been fantastic. But despite that, there's a lot of discontent out there. A lot of discontent, more so than I can remember feeling in the past. People are divided. People are angry about various things. People are glomming onto particular issues and
I think there's a great deal of anxiety and worry.
Yeah.
About the direction of the country, about people's personal finances, about their own security and safety. There's been a trend, and we see it in children too, this serious rise in anxiety and general fear about what's going to happen here.
Well, there's a poll that came out about the American dream, and I thought this was such a high number. 75% of Americans polled by the 2017 Hearth State of American Dream report say the American dream is slipping away. 75%. Three-quarters of Americans think the American dream is slipping away, whatever that means to people. I suppose it means different things to different people, but fewer than 1 in 5 Americans feel they're fully living the American dream.
Did it give any details about what that means?
Well, 75% think that the American dream is in danger. And it's interesting when asked to be a bit more specific, and it's always hard in these polls. What were the top reasons? The number one reason was government policies. And I'm not exactly sure what that breaks down into, because you could say, oh, there's too much regulation and that's a problem. Or you could say, the policies of banning Muslims coming to this country is a government. I mean, it could be a wide variety of things, but the number one reason was government policies, followed by income inequality, household debt, credit card debt, and the prohibitive costs of purchasing a home.
Right. Well, that all reflects real trends that we've seen in our country for the past 20, 30 years, in which real income for middle class families has declined, real wages have declined or stagnated, and all the growth has happened in the very top echelons of income earners in this country. So, yeah, of course, it's harder to buy a home. Kids have more student debt than we did, than previous generations did. They don't know how they're going to be able to afford to buy a home. And people have seen their healthcare costs rise, and their incomes have not kept pace with rising expenses in our society right now. I mean, that is all very reflective of real societal trends and sociological trends that are happening in our country, that feeling of despair.
And I think a lot of that anxiety does affect our health and definitely affects our sleep, which brings us to our guest who's joining us. And that would be Dr. Joseph Ojile, who is the new chair of the National Sleep Foundation. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
You're also the medical director and CEO of the Clayton Sleep Institute in Maplewood. What does the Sleep Institute do? Do you do sleep tests to see what's keeping people up, or do you do more like counseling to help me figure out why I'm waking up every 20 minutes or what?
Well, we provide comprehensive sleep services for the region and have been doing so for about over 15 years. And so we do sleep testing. We also do sleep evaluations, because sleep testing isn't the only thing. It's important to get at root causes of other sleep issues. So not all sleep issues have to do with things that we have to get people in the sleep laboratory for. So indeed, some patients are quite relieved when they find out that much of what we need to do is, first of all, have a medical interview with them, take a history, find out what their issue is, and then proceed with a personalized plan to try to address that issue. Go ahead.
So when most of Americans are chronically sleep deprived, how do you know when it becomes a medical issue? Is it because you're falling asleep at the wheel or you're falling asleep at work?
So, important question, probably one of the most important questions you can ask. And I do want you to know that over at Clayton Sleep Institute and the National Sleep Foundation and in St. Louis, we want dreams to increase.
Yeah. Yes.
So the issue is always, why do we sleep? And one of the reasons we sleep is to have great functionality and great quality lives during the day. That's an awfully simple way to look at it, but we sleep to be well and to feel healthy and vibrant during the day. So if people aren't having that sense of robust health during the day, it may be because they have a sleep problem if we do an analysis of that. So if you're having trouble staying awake or having trouble focusing and doing well during the day, sleep should be something that's considered as an issue that might be contributing to that. So the next step is to start to evaluate that. One of the things that we want to be advocating for in both the local, regional, and national affairs is that sleep should be part of your total health plan. So just like you follow a healthy diet, you work on exercise, sleep should be the third part of that trifecta to say, I need to have a sleep plan that will be part of my health plan. And indeed, that takes effort, it takes some planning, and it takes a bit of commitment, because going to bed at about the same time, getting up at about the same time, making sure the allotted time for sleep, or what we call the sleep opportunity, is adequate. That, for many folks, for most of us, is not an accident. It's good behaviors started at young ages, which continue. Some people learn them later in life, just like some people learn about exercise and diet later in life. But many folks learn them early. And if you look at what's happening, kind of taking what you've said and put it to an extreme, in competitive athletics now, and indeed to some degree in competitive business, you're starting to see leaders in those fields say, I'm going to incorporate sleep health into optimizing my performance. You hear athletes are now speaking about it openly. We saw, for instance, a person we like to use because it's easy, right, is Michael Phelps, talked about it during the Olympics. They said, what are you doing here? You're there. It was kind of a relaxed interview. You're probably having a good time. He goes, no, I'm here to do three things: eat, train, swim, and sleep.
Well, it's interesting when you say talk about it openly, because wouldn't you agree that while we always discuss how we're sleep deprived as a nation, there's almost a bit of pride there when people will brag about, I stayed up really late or I only got 4 hours of sleep. I am not a person who brags about that because I know that I don't get enough sleep. I'm one of those people who has weird hours. I get up at 3 a.m. I never have enough sleep, so I never pass up an opportunity for a nap. But wouldn't you say that that is a difficult thing to combat, that feeling that, even though we know we have to sleep, it's kind of cool
somehow
to
being
not.
tired is a measure of your productivity and worth.
It is. You could not both be more correct. This is a battle we fight every day, which is that there's a certain badge of honor to being sleep deprived or to talking about how you basically didn't sleep because you had to work so long or you were out having so much fun, whatever the reason is. Yes, we have to battle that. And it starts at a young age and it doesn't stop. Age doesn't discriminate against sort of misinformation and bad information. So it continues on. And we have an adage, you can't cheat sleep. Sleep will always catch you. And so if you cheat it long enough, you will begin to have side effects from that in some way, shape, or form. And frankly, to affirm you, Debbie, your schedule is probably one of the worst of all work schedules. That schedule of having to come in sort of late night. Mm-hmm. You're really not coming in the morning. You're coming in when it's still night.
Yeah, it's still the middle of the night.
It is. It's a very difficult schedule. You're not quite on night shift, but you're clearly not on day shift. And so folks have a great difficulty adapting to that. It's not a biologically favorable shift because, again, and you're living in two worlds. And so, if you couple us daytime livers, if you try to have a daytime life, you intrinsically are imposing on one of your issues. Either you're staying up too long, so you're going to not get enough sleep, or you go to bed so early that you are jeopardizing some of your relationship life. So if you have
kids and a husband and
social life.
Exactly.
I know. So what are the main causes that you see that people don't get good sleep?
Yeah, so I kind of propose dividing those up into several things. Let's talk about and agree that we're going to not talk so much about sleep disorders. So certainly of the people who come to see the doctor, obstructive sleep apnea is going to be the most common thing that people seek care for because it's an anatomic, mechanical abnormality that we have ready fixes for. We can fix people. The vast majority of people we can make better. Okay, they just need to have an evaluation. About 10% of people in our country, in study after study, has a thing called chronic insomnia, which is the inability to get to sleep or stay asleep and having a daytime consequence. And then there's sleep behaviors, which are sometimes things people can control, sometimes they can't, where they act out their dreams and they have abnormal behaviors. Sometimes folks will talk about night terrors or sleepwalking, things like that. So abnormal behaviors. So let's subtract those out, okay, and say we all agree that those are medical issues that people should see doctors about. The biggest issue for most folks are going to be some abnormality of either, and I use the term abnormality loosely. In other words, they haven't agreed that they're going to make getting to sleep and staying asleep at the same time an issue. The other thing that happens with folks commonly is not getting enough sleep. The doctor term for that's insufficient sleep syndrome. That's not something we need to remember, but really they're just not getting enough sleep. And then the issue is why? So sometimes it's a choice. Sometimes the choice over a long period of time can become a biological issue. So the easiest way to explain it is if you think about adolescence. Adolescence, and I don't know if you have adolescents around the house.
Do.
All right,
Yeah.
so it isn't because they dislike you both as moms. It's because their biology starts to rotate when they hit adolescence and they stay up later and go to bed later. It's a biological issue for them. And so that becomes an issue for children and parents. It also can become exaggerated where it starts to go so far that they're staying up later and later and later.
And they're sleeping till noon.
And there you have it. So that's an issue. And it can get much worse in college. So those are the sorts of behaviors that over time people have not felt the need to address them, but they are addressable.
We talk a lot about bad sleep health where people have the TV in their bedroom or they're sitting in bed and they're on their iPad
laptops and their
stressing
devices.
themselves out
Yeah,
on Twitter. I mean, how much of a factor is that really?
It's probably the single biggest factor in our country today. So it's an epidemic. And that's one of the and that's why I want to thank the two of you, because these sorts of opportunities with respected people in our community really raise that issue to the forefront. Technology is, for 99.9% of us, totally optional at bedtime.
Right.
All right. And so, there might be the fire chief or the police chief or somebody who
Right.
has to have it, but most of us can set that aside. So you have seen most of the technology companies now have blue light blockers. As you know, blue light is stimulating, so it causes you to be awake by suppressing melatonin. So if you go to your iPhone or any other phone or your Amazon device, there is a setting that will block out blue light, and it syncs to wherever you are, and it knows where you are in the world, and it will sync at sunset to turn out the blue light off your phone.
I need to look at my devices and make sure.
If you pull, when
Yes,
we're
I
done, I'll
will.
show you where that's a simple deal.
Excellent.
So
Love it.
You're starting to see sleep health get into the technology.
I love that.
So that's an issue, but it's still not. It still doesn't allow us just to randomly use our devices at
You
night.
still have to have a little self-control.
Yes.
Exactly, because the
Self-discipline, yeah.
stimulation, the light, all that will start to cause you to be awake. So if we could get people to turn their technology, get it away from them an hour or two before bedtime and start to wind down.
Or two. Oh, that'll
I
give me
know.
the
Yeah,
shake.
that's very stressful. Right, exactly. And especially you start talking about adolescents or young adults.
Yes.
It's a real challenge. And so
It is.
we see this frequently. People come in and then you start to have the conversation and that comes up. And we are very direct about it. And some people have a high degree of stress when you have that conversation. TV, the main thing with TV, of course, is to have it in a if you can, a room separate from your bedroom. Then you can watch something as long as it's relatively calm. We certainly suggest not watching action movies or the news before bedtime. That's a
Right.
great way for getting your
Getting all stressed
excited.
out.
Exactly.
Nightmares, I swear.
Well,
So-
we have to wrap up, but Dr. Ojile, two questions for you. I don't know if there's a quick answer for these. Is there a certain amount, I guess, is there a difference for how much sleep different people need? Because they say 8 hours, but some people function okay on 6 and some people need 10. So is there a formula, and can you make up the deficit with naps, or is it just trying to play catch up?
Okay, so I'm going to do a quick answer, which is probably not the best thing for me. But if you go to sleepfoundation.org, the sleep duration recommendations came out about a year and a half ago. It was a national consensus conference with experts in all different fields. The answer is how much sleep we need is determined by us genetically. Each of us is a little different. Our parents put it in our genes. How you figure that there's a range by age, which is very easy for your listeners to look at. For us, adults, the most common range is around 7 to 8 hours. How much you exactly or precisely need, the key thing is to get enough healthy sleep over time, and you'll be able to determine that. What we do know is certainly half to 3/4 of people in the country are not accomplishing that goal. And so if we can slowly increase the total amount of time, they will do better. If you're feeling sleepy and tired during the day, there's a high likelihood that one, if not the major contributor to that, is just not a sheer enough total sleep time.
And then can you make that up with a nap during the day?
The simple but a little bit of a tricky question. The answer is frequently yes, if done in a proper way. Some people are regular nappers, so you need X amount of hours per 24-hour period. So let's just say, for the sake of conversation, you need 7.5 hours. If because of your schedule, you really can only get 6.5 hours each night, if you scheduled a 1-hour nap and could stick to it, that would be a reasonable approach. So napping can work, and we sometimes forget because we get bogged down in our own personal space, in our own personal time. In centuries gone by, especially before electricity, people used to sometimes, we know that they slept in several episodes during the night. They will talk in old literature about first and second sleep. They used to
Right.
sleep.
Yeah, I've read about
right?
this.
Isn't that
Mhm.
interesting?
It is.
So in effect, that is a very similar thing to your question, but they did it in an organized, controlled, and total hours properly. It's cool stuff, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Debbie, we need to start a nap movement.
Oh, I'm all for it.
Yeah.
I love
I
naps.
saw a room here. It'd be perfect for a napping room on the way in.
Well, Dr. Ojile, thank you for your expert opinion. Clayton Sleep Institute is in Maplewood, and of course, he is the chairman of the National Sleep Foundation and the Website again is sleepfoundation.org.
Yes.
If you want some more information on that. No nap for me today, but I honestly, the first thing I think of when I wake up in the morning is, do I get a nap today? And if I know I will, I'm like, yay!
And your second thought is, where's the coffee? Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I know.
I'm Debbie Monterey of KMOX Radio.
And I'm Aisha Sultan with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch.
This has been the Aisha and Debbie Dish Podcast. Thanks for listening, and join them for the next Aisha and Debbie Dish Podcast.